1777. The American Army is out in the wilderness. They're cold. The nearest Starbucks is in Philadelphia, but Philadelphia is held by the British. The Continental Congress would really like to get to Starbucks, and would Washington please get rid of the British? And the British Army is at Germantown. Now historically, Washington divided his army up into 5 different groups and came down by 5 different roads to surprise the British from 5 different angles. Now that would be a neat trick if you had a really experienced, highly trained army to pull off, because they're doing this in the middle of the night. It became wildly uncoordinated. One command never did show up. I mean, imagine, it's a dark, foggy night. There are no modern maps. There are no streetlights. You're trying to march your troops through possibly unfamiliar roads. This time, this what if, Washington has decided to pull a play out of Howe's playbook. He's going to come down the Raven Hill Road here on the west side, cross over the Wissahickon, and attack the British from the flank. Now, because I'm playing solo, the British are going to fall for this. Now, next time I play this, we'll say the British are going to stick the unit there to watch that bridge, because Howe's no fool. And we'll see how that plays out. But today, this American scheme is going to work, and we'll see if it actually makes a huge difference. Now, the first turn at Germantown is the American night move. I keep saying American because that's just what comes out. But it's colonial, it's rebel, it's congressional army. It's not yet American. But rather than having to do a lot of post-recording editing, we're just going to go with American one. Alright, that was the night move. Now here we are at turn 1. Now you can immediately see by bringing his whole army down one road, Washington's line is really strung out. Half his army isn't even on the map yet. Maybe there was something to coming down different roads. Early morning movement. Let's see what we have. Now here you can see in the first hours of the morning, the American demonstration in front of Chew House has begun. Howe has begun advancing the British Army forward. Over here to the west, you can see the long line of the American Army, and their last element has just entered the map. How quickly can they form up across the Wissahickon? Now here we have the detachment at Chew House. I stand them on end because it's just this little building. Of course, I could put them on the end like this. Play-wise, it makes no difference. Now the latest edition of the Pub Battles rules is duel out soon. There's been a couple improvements to the way the game is played. One of those is that when a unit becomes spent, instead of turning it up, let's try the 71st here. Instead of becoming spent and turning up like this, and then become spent, you flip them over like this, and the label is upside down now. But the enemy can't see. To him it looks like a regular army, so it adds some fog of war. Now when units meet and are in contact, and it's time to resolve battle, you turn them face up, and then everybody can see who's fighting. After combat, if anyone's left, you turn it back like that. Now Washington's plan wasn't to have these guys attack the British, just to be out front and make a lot of noise. But they weren't expected to find British troops this far north, in Chew House. So I'm saying, guess what? They ran into some Brits. I'm already hamstringing the British troops by not allowing them to react to this American move. So let's make a little American screw up here, and they end up in combat. Now in Chew House, there's just a detachment. But these were elite troops, so that this detachment only attacks with 1 die, but like an elite unit, it absorbs the first hit that it takes. Alright, the militia got 1 hit on the British, the elite block absorbs it. The British, with their 1 die, did 1 hit, which counts as 2 hits versus militia. They ran off. The Continental regulars that were escorting them are stepping up. They both got a hit. They're both eliminated. The way I choose to interpret that is that the British were driven out, or surrounded and captured in Chew House. But the colonial forces that were left are no longer a fighting unit of any size. I'm going to say they're escorting the prisoners back. So you have a loss of 1 American detachment and 1 British detachment. And now we have turn 2. Alright, now it's the end of mid-morning. One thing to remember, at Germantown it's very foggy. All day long, very foggy. You can only see 1/3 of an infantry. Now at this point, as they're about to open up the attack on these rebel forces here, they start hearing a commotion down here because there's just no way you can bring an army out of column and deploy them in the field without a lot of yelling and commotion and trying to get guys in line, especially in the fog where you can't see anything. So once they start coming out of column and forming up into line, the British will have heard them. How well do they respond to that? Well, that's up to the chit draw. If the chit draw is favorable to the British, they respond in order, in time. If not, they'll be less fortunate. Alright, that was late morning movement. Nathaniel has arrived with his baggage. Howe places him in command of the troops in front of the Americans coming from this direction, while he spins his command around to deal with the threat down below. Okay, it's midday. There's still no combat. Both sides are feeling the way around. I mean, there's desultory firing on either side, kind of feeling out the enemy. But they still don't really know what's going on where. Now, Smallwood and Armstrong, the militia leaders, have fanned out their line to look like there's more, make it feel like there's more of them. Being a creature of habit, I had flipped the spent militia unit up as opposed to flipping it over. So I flipped it back over. So now the British player looking at this wouldn't know where the spent militia was. Now, spent militia, because its first hit counts as 2 hits, and a spent unit is eliminated on 2 hits, means that they're not going to last long in combat. But they will get to fire. There's still a potential for them to do some major damage, but they're probably not going to stick around for it to see the results. Now here, Howe has repositioned his forces, but you can see how the British are really feeling outnumbered. They've got a line of colonials to their front, and now colonials in their rear, and there's a lot of blocks here. And the British have essentially, Howe knows he's got 2 infantry blocks here, an infantry block here. He has his artillery here, but that's limited by the fog. The Queen's Rangers were cautiously moving through what appeared to be a hole in the colonial line when they encountered Pulaski's dragoons. And now it's turn 5, mid-afternoon. Alright, now we have turn 5 combat. And as I said, units in contact for combat are turned face up. You can see Sullivan's command on the continental left and Greene's command on the continental right are in combat. Alright, at the conclusion of combat you can see that the British line has fallen back some. But does that really tell the story? You can't see who's spent and who's fresh. The colonial forces have lost a block. Now another change in the rules, I believe is going to be adopted with the next version, is that when you count an army's breaking, before it was always you count the number of infantry blocks. After discussion and experience, we've decided to include all blocks. Obviously detachments aren't included. Artillery and cavalry are included. Now these 2 armies are very similar in size and they both break when they've lost 5 blocks. And it doesn't matter if they're cavalry, artillery, or infantry. 5 blocks. It's cleaner, it's simpler, and it yields more authentic results. Also, I want to mention on turn 5 that Cornwallis himself has shown up, and he brought with him his grenadiers. So now the British hand has been significantly strengthened. Turn 6, dinner time combat. Now we've flipped over all the combatants, and what has contact revealed? Here on the colonial right, Greene's troops have run into the Grenadiers. Moving west, so the household guards are spent, as are the colonial troops attacking them. Next you have more spent British troops being attacked by the elite, Maxwell Light. And finally on the colonial left, Sullivan's spent troops are attacking fresh British troops. And General Kniphausen has run into some detachments and some militia. Let's see how this plays out. Alright, after combat you can see the British line has kind of held, maybe fallen back a little bit more. Of course the militia line is falling back under the British pressure. Now losses, the British have lost 2 blocks, one of them elite. The Americans have lost 2 regular blocks, all infantry. It's not decided yet, but it was not the sweep that Washington was hoping for. Now we move on to turn 7, early evening. Alright, the Colonials keep the pressure up. All along the line, all the units are spent, except one of Sullivan's blocks. On Kniphausen's drive, the militiamen fought well and fell back. Essentially, their chit was drawn afterwards. So Kniphausen had contacted, and then when they moved, they simply fell back. Well, let's see how this combat goes. Alright, the British have continued to get pushed back, and all along the line the Americans have now gained the Germantown pike. Except over here, Sullivan's men were caught in a swale and devastated by British fire. Americans have lost another unit. And now we come to turn 8, and there is time for one more effort. To break, the Americans need to eliminate 3 British blocks, and the British need to eliminate 2 American blocks. In the end, the British refuse to take the bait, and they're not going to make one final attack, and the Colonials do not attack. So all is quiet along the Germantown pike. However, Kniphausen is making one last push. In the gloaming darkness, the final effort is fairly costly for the British as they lose a block of Hessian, though the militia wants no more of this and they have disbanded for the night. So in the end, the British have lost 10 points worth of troops, the Colonials have lost 11 points worth of troops. I'd call that a draw. Now, if we were in a tournament and somebody had to be declared a winner or loser, the British would have won and went on to the next round. The other alternative you could have done is gone on to fight day 2. Day 2, Cornwallis gets some more Hessians. Now if you're someone who has to know, you can fight that second day. For my purposes here, this video will be long enough, so we'll call it done. That was a great game. Thanks for joining me. And remember, guard your bags.